Welcome to I Wish You Could Hear This, where we explore great stories and simple proven steps to help you thrive in life, faith, and relationships.
In our research, we've heard hundreds of hope-filled strategies for marriage, parenting, leadership, and life that are grounded in science and consistent with biblical truth. And now you can hear them too.
I'm Shaunti Feldhahn.
And I'm Jeff Feldhahn.
Life hands us hurt whether we want it to or not. And if we ignore that pain or don't resolve it, it comes out sideways in anxiety, unforgiveness, friendship breakups, discontentment, and big feelings, which ironically only hurts us more and probably hurts those we love. But what if truly healing our hurt is possible? And what if our healing could even help heal the hurting people we care about? What if we just stopped running from the hurt and instead run to a God who can handle it and heal it? That's what we're going to learn today on I Wish You Could Hear This with our guest, Willow Weston.
Willow, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you guys for having me.
We have had some tech issues trying to get into this, so we are expecting this to be a really good conversation today.
It's going to be amazing.
It is definitely going to be amazing. All that we had to climb, the hills we had to climb in order to get this to you. So let me just introduce you, Willow. You are an author, you're a speaker, you're a podcast host. You've had plenty of these tech issues yourself. You're used to this. You're a conference curator, and you're the founder and director of Collide, which is a nonprofit ministry that impacts thousands of women. You're also a wife and a mom of two.
Wow. Exhausting.
She does a lot. And you say you love telling stories and inviting other people to share theirs. And I particularly like something that you say on your website, which is you say, I'm all people all the time. Facts and figures bore me, which... Okay, we get to collide with us as social researchers because we love facts and figures, but we also love a good story.
For sure. So we're going to let you get into the details in a minute of how you started this ministry, Collide. But first, it's important to note that you just released your book by the same name, Collide, Running into Healing When Life Hands You Hurt. Congratulations on your first book. So I'm curious, how does it feel to have your heart and soul in print for the world to read?
Terrifying.
Yeah, okay. That's about what I expected.
It feels like a major vulnerability hangover. I mean, my joke with the Lord is like, man, Lord, why didn't you call me to write a recipe book or like a 10 places to take your kids, bucket list vacations or something like that. But this book is very much me filleting my life open and sharing about the pain I experienced as a child and how I desperately needed healing and how God showed up and collided with my life and brought that healing. And now he's using that pain and that healing to help other people in their pain. And so I the month before this book released, I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if this was a good idea. I don't know if I should have done this. But now I'm a couple months in and I'm hearing beautiful stories of the way the Lord's using it in people's lives. And so that makes it worth it.
So that leads collide. I mean, that's a word that I don't know. I don't use very often in my life, at least not in really a positive kind of situation. So how did you arrive at that word and in doing so? Yeah.
What does it mean?
Tell us about your ministry. How that
Yeah. Well, that's a big story. But when I had my second child, my mom, who I hadn't lived with since I was 15 years old, she actually got rid of me when I was 15, and another family had to take me in. And so when I had my second child, I was probably 32 years old, and my mom decided to move into my town and be super grandma. And she knocked on my door one ordinary day, and I went to the door and I saw it was her, and she wasn't hurting me or anything, but I looked out the peephole and I freaked out. And all my childhood pain and experiences with her of neglect and addiction and different things we experienced together just kind of came flooding forward. And I took my baby Bella And I ran upstairs and I hid in a closet because I didn't want to let my mom in the door. I didn't want her to come in, and so I didn't want her to know we were there. And I had this moment in the closet where God said, Willow, I've done a lot in your life since you've given your life to me, because I gave my life to Jesus when I was 21. He said, but there's more healing that needs to take place in your life, and you need to step out of this closet and you need to get some help. And so probably within a week of that, I was in a counseling office, and, she said, what brings you in here today? And I'm kind of a little sassy. So I was like, oh, I'm playing hide and go seek, alone with my baby. And, but then I started telling her about the history I had with my mother, and her immediate response was that you need to tell your mom that you can only spend 30 minutes a week with her. And the only way I can explain this to you guys is it felt like the counselor, like this presence, the Spirit of God came in the room. And I actually yelled at this therapist. I don't normally act like that. And I was like, no, that is not what I am being called to do. And I just had this deep sense that God was calling me to something more than that. And the more was, and all these words started coming out of my mouth, I was like, I was born into wounds. I collided with my mother's wounds. She didn't get healing, and so her wounds wounded me, and now I might wound my daughter, and I need healing so that I can bring healing into the world instead of more wounds. And when I look at Jesus and he collides with people in the New Testament, because I'd been spending the last 10 years following Jesus, looking at his life, I'm like, when he collides with people, he leaves them more whole than broken, and that's what I want to do. I want to collide with people and leave them more whole than broken, but I'm so broken that I'm gonna hurt other people like I was hurt. And so I started crying, and for myself, but also humanity. I started looking at all of us, you and me, and we collide with each other, and we wound each other if we haven't gotten healing. And if we let Jesus heal us, then in all of our collisions with other people, we can bring healing into the world
instead of hurt.
Yeah.
Can I mention something?
Yeah, and then I'm going to mention something too.
Okay, that's occurring to me. Okay.
All the mentions, guys.
Yes, okay. Because one of the sort of the big ideas, so as people can probably tell as they're listening, is that people should run toward their pain instead of away from it. And it's interesting that over the last 3 years, one of the big research projects that Jeff and I have done, because we have a book coming out called Habits of Hope, early next year. So in March 2027, if anybody's listening to this at a different time. But in the point behind Habits of Hope is we researched what are the habits of the most resilient, joyful, hopeful, healed people. And one of the habits was that they run toward their pain instead of away from it. One of the habits, it's basically, we've gotten to this idea as a culture that the best way to handle pain is to try to protect yourself from it and to try to avoid being uncomfortable, stepping back from discomfort in order to feel better. And one of the things that our study found, a lot of different psychological studies have found, is that actually backfires over time. It may be like a necessary boundary for a moment, but over time it backfires. And so I'd love to hear your personal explanation of why that backfires and why people should run toward their pain, because it sounds like it's a really good example of this.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of compassion for all of us. We've all been through things that we should have never gone through. But what happened is that we were taught to avoid pain. I mean, and we were taught to avoid pain by hurting people. Right? I mean, if you even think about what we do with little children, we slap a Band-Aid on their knee when they're crying because we want them to stop crying. We're like, you have a Band-Aid now, stop crying. And the kid's lips quivering and they're like, still want to cry, but they feel like they have to stop crying. But we've been invited to, just pray and get over it and pick yourself up by the bootstraps and move on. And we've been told all of these things. But the problem with pain is if you don't actually heal it, it's unresolved and it stays inside of you and it comes out sideways and it continues to hurt your life. And so we have potentially a world of people who are hurting and they need healing, but they've been taught to avoid dealing with their pain, avoid having to look at their pain. And I talk about this in the book. I mean, I had an alcoholic mother, and why did she drink? She drank to numb her pain. And because she numbed her pain instead of running straight into her pain, she started creating more and more pain for her own life and for other people's lives. And so our avoidance isn't working. It's not working. And I'm actually daring people in this book to do what Jesus does. If you look at Jesus, he is on an all-out pursuit to run into people who are hurting. I mean, you look at him, you know, he collided with the woman who was hemorrhaging. She'd been hemorrhaging for 12 years. He collided with the paralytic, the man on the mat, the man whose hand was shriveled. I mean, he goes out of his way to meet women who had crazy reputations and men that everyone else hated. He runs into these people because he knows they're hurting, and he wants to actually help them recognize they're hurting first so that then he can heal them. And yeah, and I think what we're doing by teaching our kids and our spouses and our friends to avoid pain, it's not working, and we need to say yes to the invitation that Jesus has to go, yes, I am hurting, and I do need you to heal me.
Well, you know, in hearing your story of you sitting in your closet with your
Wow.
with your baby, I'm struck by what you felt the Lord spoke to you, in the sense that for a lot of us, we want God to deliver us from our pain. We want it to be that, okay, you're healed now. It's good. You're good. But the words you heard were, Willow, you're going to need to get out of this closet. You need to take some action. You need to do it. And God is all in that. We want the instantaneous healing from these wounds and these hurts and everything to be okay. But you have to walk it out.
Well, Jesus said that multiple times
Sure.
in the healings that he did. Stretch out your hand. You know,
Correct.
He could have healed it while the hand was standing there.
Absolutely could have.
It's the things that he knows we need, I suspect, to do.
So I was struck by that you're going to need to get out of this closet. There's some part that you play in this, and that's what you guys were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I see Jesus all the time inviting us to participate in the healing that we long for. I think a lot of us just hope to wake up on a Wednesday and be well. And that's not necessarily how the Lord wants it to work, because there's something deeper. There's even a deeper healing that he wants to do than just wave a magic wand over our lives. And when God asked me to step out of the closet and get help, if he would have just made me better, I wouldn't have had to go back and evaluate and name the pain and name the trauma and think about the things that I went through and what they told me about who God is, what they told me about who I am, what they told me about other people. I had a deeper invitation where the Lord wanted me to really go backwards, which means you have to be really brave and allow yourself to go back and feel hard things, to have hard conversations, to admit to my dad, who felt like a no-show in my life, that I had so much anger towards him and deep bitterness and resentment and hatred, and have to have that conversation.
Wow.
If God would have just waved a magic wand, I wouldn't have had to do these deeper things that created deeper healing on a way broader level for my life.
And you know, as Corinthians says, you know, with the same comfort we've been comforted with, we're to comfort others. And it's kind of hard to say, well, just believe for the magic wand. You know, here is how I had to walk it through. And that is encouragement to anyone else who is in that kind of condition or state, and they know, well, Willow made it, or she's making it.
Yeah, I met a woman speaking at a retreat once, and I love telling her story because I think we can all resonate with it. But, I met her after I spoke at a first session. She came up and she was crying, and she's like, I don't know why I'm crying. I'm good. I have God. And then after the next session, same thing. Like, I keep crying, but I have a Savior. Like, I don't know why I'm crying. And finally, by the time lunch hit, I was like, let's sit down and chat. And she was like, I just keep crying about something that was like 10 years ago to you, but I don't know why I'm crying. And I said, tell me what happened 10 years ago. And she said that she was dating a guy and they were planning to get married, and he didn't have the same faith and the same values as her, and she realized that she needed to call it off, and she called it off, and he killed himself. Oh. And her pastors and her mentors told her, you're good, you did the right thing, and you're good because you have a Savior, move on. And here we were 10 years later. And I said to her, you're still crying because you're still sad. And she was invited to just move on. But the truth is we actually need to recognize sometimes we're still grieving because we're still grievous. We're still mad because we're still mad. We're still bitter because we're still bitter. We have to be given permission to recognize, no, there are things that are hard. I said, someone killed themselves. That's tragic. You have every reason to still be crying, every reason to still be sad. And just because you know Jesus and just because you have a Savior doesn't mean it didn't hurt. In fact, your Jesus is probably weeping with you right now because it is so sad that someone lost hope and gave up on their life, and that you struggled with blame over that. So I think there's this weird thing in our faith where sometimes we're just trying to whisk people's pain away because we're uncomfortable with pain. And so it's just easier, like, hand them a tissue, let me pray over you to get you to shut up and stop talking about your issues so we can move on. And it's so unhelpful. It's so unhelpful.
So I love what you said just there about you need hope. So from your experience and from our experience, if couples have hope, a sense of hope in their relationship, they can make it through a whole lot of difficult seasons. How did you keep hope alive while you were in your own journey, unpacking these things that were so difficult? How did you manage to get up and go, okay, another day, I'm going to keep moving forward?
I mean, I had spent, like I said, about 10 years, running into who Jesus is. And it's very hard to spend time with Jesus and not have hope. I mean, I look at him and he walks into tombs where there's total darkness, and he brings light and life. And it's not just something I read, it's something I've personally experienced in my life. When I look at him and he weeps with Mary and Martha, I've personally experienced him weeping over my own if you hads. Like, if you had been here, if you had protected me from being hurt and abused as a kid, if you had not been, if you would have had my dad come for me. Like, I've had experiences where even as real and raw and honest as I've gotten with God, he's always shown up and given me every reason to hope. So I feel like he's such a personal God, and he'll meet you in the most hopeless circumstances if you allow him to. And I've never been without hope since meeting him.
That's a great way of putting it. I'm okay. I want to ask a practical question. Because one of the things that probably all of us have seen, and it may be us that's experienced this, it may be that we've seen a friend go through, really bad hurt. Maybe they avoided it for a while, maybe they didn't, but now they're trying to deal with it, okay? Or we're trying to deal with it. And one of the things that happens on the opposite side is that people get sucked in, and they get sucked into their hurt. And it's like they're marinating it and they can't climb out of that. And it ends up, there's this almost like this grievance mindset. We've all seen this happen. Sometimes it's happened in our own lives. What is the way that we can run towards the hurt and run towards Jesus in the hurt without it becoming a sort of a cycle of like almost bathing ourselves in it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I'm thinking of a question to ask ourselves while you're asking that question, which is, do you identify with being wounded or do you identify with being an overcomer? I mean, I think I've become, in my own circles, well known for being kind of like the TMI lady that has been so real about my pain. So I do talk about pain a lot, but I identify with being an overcomer. I identify with God's purpose, my pain. I'm real about my pain, and he's shown up and he's healed it, but now he's purposing it to help other people. And I have met people along the way where it's almost like they don't know who they are outside of
the pain.
This pain, right?
Yeah.
I mean, look at the guy in scripture where he's been sitting on a mat for 38 long years, hoping that he'd be healed by the waters, and Jesus shows up and collides with him. And so the healer's standing right in front of him, and this guy just longs for healing. And he's making all these excuses why he hasn't gotten down to the water. And Jesus asks him this profound question. He says, "Do you want to get well?" And if you actually think about that question, you let Jesus ask you that question, it brings up all these other questions because I've let him ask me it. Like, well, Willow, if you want to get well, why are you acting so unhealthy? Why are you continuing to engage in unhealthy behaviors? Why aren't you reaching out for help? I mean, there's just so many questions that one question brings up. But this man, I think Jesus is kind of calling him out because he's like, you're more comfortable identifying with the guy who can't get well than identifying with a guy who is standing in front of a healer, and you say, I need your healing, and then I'm gonna write a new story in your life. Like Jesus could write a new story in his life. And so are you more comfortable with who you have been in your wounded state than you are in the idea that God could write a new story in your life? Do you know what I mean?
I
don't think that gives you...
No,
it's not necessarily
so
practical, but that's what my mind thinks of when you ask me that question.
It's a mind shift.
Well, I think that's actually very practical.
Absolutely.
You just ask yourself that question. So I don't know if Jeff remembers this. This is going back, 2 or 3 years. We had lunch after a speaking engagement. We were doing a marriage event, I think, or maybe a sermon interview at a church on a Sunday morning. And the pastor and I don't know if it was the pastor and wife that took us out to lunch. Somebody took us out to lunch after.
We didn't have to pay.
No wonder you remember this.
Totally awesome.
Jeff remembers this. And it was just a year or so into me finding out that I had breast cancer. And so I had the diagnosis, had done the surgery, had started the therapy, like all the things. And discovered that this other wife who was sitting across the table at lunch was about 10 years ahead of us on the journey, and that she had breast cancer, and it was now, I was maybe a year and a half in, she was 10 years in. And it was interesting. I asked her, do you have any advice for us, as we go? And I don't know what I was expecting, something about make sure you take your therapy drug and, whatever. And she looked at me with this intensity across the table. And she said, do not make being a breast cancer survivor your identity. And I went, what? And she said, look, I am proud that I survived. I've done the walks. I've raised the money. I wear the pink pin. But she said, I have several friends who they don't know who they are almost without being a breast cancer survivor as part of who they are. It's just so much a part of their identity. And she said, it's something that, when you have this pain and you have this trauma, it becomes a part of you for sure in some ways, because it will always have happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
But as she put it, something like, our goal should be to get healing and move on where we can help people, rather than not knowing who we are outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it just strikes me that it's not the same exactly, but it's similar to what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's an important conversation. I definitely think some people can take this important conversation and almost fast forward people's brokenness and not make room for
That's
them
my
to like
concern
share
too.
what's true,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
if I was to say what happens more, I would say we're more often than not giving people permission to like run into their pain and be real about it than we are seeing as many people identify with their pain. A lot of people just have not. They haven't been given permission to be real. They've either been told they have to keep secrets, they have to tell a different story than what happened in their family of origin, that they're the happy girl, they're the fun girl.
Mm-hmm.
They just have to keep being that person. And so that both are important, right? Like I wouldn't want to err on one or the other, where I'm like, hey, like you need to get over your pain and like be an overcomer. and that could look like we're looking at this girl again who 10 years later, she was never given space to grieve, right? And so
right, exactly.
That's a
so
tough.
You're right. We have to do both.
Mm-hmm.
And thanks for letting us sort of process through this, because I'm guessing that's what our listeners will be processing through too. But you make a really good point that it is really easy for us to be, here's a Band-Aid, please stop crying.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, please stop talking about how scared you are about the breast cancer coming back. Right? Like, I could see how that would be an issue too. So thank you for challenging us with that, Willow. Seriously, like we need both directions considered.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people who've gone through things that they haven't even realized they've gone through. And when we can be the kind of friend or the kind of mom or the kind of spouse where we can help them to recognize it. I mean, I was in a conversation with a woman once. She reached out to me. She said she got a scary cancer diagnosis and she was terrified of hell and she was terrified of heaven and she wanted to meet. And I sat with her in my office and I said, a lot of people are terrified of hell and dying. But I've never heard of someone who's terrified of heaven. Can you tell me more about that? And she said, well, and she started listing off all of her church involvement. I grew up in the church. I grew up in youth group. I went all the time. I read the Bible. I was in small groups. When I first had kids, I brought them but I haven't been involved since for a long time. And like when I was younger, a man used to hurt me and he told me to be quiet and he told me God wanted me to be quiet while he hurt me. And then I did do youth group and she's listing all this stuff. And I said, hold on. Can we rewind and go back to something you said a minute ago? And she said, what did I say? And I said, well, did you just tell me that you were hurt by a man in church as a child and he told you to be quiet, like God's in on the abuse? Are you telling me that you were abused? And she just shook her head.
Wow.
Yes. And she had never connected that her issues with God and now her issues with dying and an afterlife, and even a good afterlife, the afterlife we all say we want, like heaven, like she hadn't connected it back to what happened to her as a child. Here, this man sexually abused her and was connecting it to God in her mind, and she had never drawn like a string to that. And so I bring that story up because that might be an extreme story, but there's so many of us who've gone through things where we don't even know we're carrying it. We don't even know it's there. And so if we can help people by entering into their stories, asking them questions, tell me more about that. Tell me about your fear about this. If we can be those kinds of people, all of a sudden something unlocks for them. where they realize, oh my gosh, I thought God was like a man who abused me. And then I got the opportunity to tell her, like, if God is a God who's in on abuse, I don't want to go to heaven either. But that's not the God I know. The God I know, he loves us. He loves us so much. He would do anything. He would die for us. Like he wants good for you. He wants healing for you. When you get to heaven, there won't be any more cancer. There won't be any more abuse. There won't be any more crying children. It'll be perfect. You'll experience the most perfect love. And I gotta like help her reframe something about God that her wounder told her that she didn't realize was there. And so I think it's so important that we do make space for people, but we can even do that back to your guys' conversation about people who identify with being a victim. You know, we can ask really important questions like, wow, it sounds like you've processed this pain a lot. Do you ever consider yourself an overcomer? Right? Do you ever see a story that God is writing with your pain where it moves from pain to you bringing healing into the world? Like, I think we can make space for people in a way that starts to move them from wounded and not even understanding how they're wounded to a place of I'm getting healing to a place of I'm bringing it.
I hear all of this, and I hear your encouragement to the mere mortals of all of us to be involved and to be willing to engage with people who are hurting. I'm putting myself in their shoes. I think some are saying, yeah, that's well and good for Willow to say. I mean, she's got skills. She's got mad skills. She can do this. She can draw people out. I'm incapable. I don't know how to do this. And as I was hearing you say that, I was remembering I recently watched the Fred Rogers movie, you know, the Tom Hanks biopic of Mr. Rogers, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. I don't know if that was the title of the movie, but in it there was this reporter journalist who was writing a profile on Fred Rogers. And he made a comment. He was standing watching Fred on the stage performing, you know, his TV show. And he said to his Fred's wife, and he said, so what's it like to be married to a living saint? And Fred Rogers' wife looked at him and said, you know, I'm not particularly fond of that term, because if you think of him as a saint, then his way of being becomes unattainable, but he works at it all the time. It's a practice. He's not a perfect person. And what I take from that is encouragement to those of us out there who feel like we don't have the ability to be a good listener or to draw out someone's hurt in a healthy, helpful way.
Or even to be the person who has the pain.
Correct.
And trying to overcome that.
Yeah. And it's those small steps of working at it every day.
Getting out of the closet.
Exactly.
So to speak. What are some of the steps, Willow, that would help somebody if they want to say, okay, I do want the Fred Rogers route. Like, I want to work at this. What does that look like? What are some of the key, like, one or two practical things that we can do so we don't end up being the person who passes down the pain to our kids?
Yeah, I think, you know, you can't take anyone where you yourself haven't gone. So you can't help people in pain if you aren't willing to deal with your own. And so the first step would be say yes to Jesus's invitation to begin healing your pain, and then take a next step to do that. And that can look like so many different things, whether it's making a call to go to therapy, whether it's, you know, inviting Jesus into a hurting space in your life through prayer, whether it's meeting with a friend or someone at church and telling them what's hurting and naming the pain, and then just continue to take next steps towards your own healing. As far as helping other people and, you know, you said, Jeff, something like, well, what if I'm not like Willow or whatever? The truth is that I don't have a counseling degree. I don't have an MDiv. I'm a business major. I'm grew up an irreligious hippie kid. There's nothing intrinsically special about me, but what I do have that I think your listeners have is that I've looked at the life of Jesus. And if you really collide with the life of Jesus, you see that he goes out of his way for hurting people. He does not avoid them. And if you're avoiding your own pain, I can guarantee you're avoiding other people's pain. But when you start to look at your own pain and realize that God can meet you there and do beautiful things, you start to get this passion that rises up in you. And you want to be more like Jesus, where you're going out and you're entering pain as hard as it is. And so the only thing that I have is just a willingness. And I, when I first became a Christian, I became a youth leader like within weeks, which is absolutely nuts, that this church let me do that. And then they wanted me to start speaking to the kids. And I remember I got up and I shared a little piece of my story about being kicked out by my mom's drunk boyfriend when I was 5 years old. And this girl came up to me after the talk. I didn't know how to write a sermon. I'd never been to Bible college, but she came up to me and she said, my stepdad abuses me and I want your rescuer. And that was the first moment where I realized that God can use my willingness and he can use what I have. And what I have is a story. And I have a need for Jesus to heal me. And that's what God can use for me. But God uses what we all have. So whatever you have, maybe you have time and you can just sit with someone and have coffee and ask them questions. Maybe you have resources where you can help someone get counseling because they need it. But God uses what we have. And so I don't think it takes, all of us going and becoming therapists and or pastors to sit with hurting people. I think most of all, it takes a Jesus heart. Wow. And if you look at the life of Jesus, that's what Jesus does. He goes after hurting people, and we need to stop being afraid to do it ourselves.
Ah, that's lovely.
Wow.
Oh, that's really, really lovely. I mean, I'd
that's
love
I
to...
think the last word.
Okay,
I mean, that's
yeah.
Do you want to keep?
No,
that's
I think it feels like the last word, or it should be the last word, Willow, because it's so true and powerful. I'll give you the last word if you want. We know that people, we're all forgetful. We all miss things. We listen and we go, gosh, I don't ever want to forget that. If there was one thing that you shared today, or if there's something else that you wanted to get to but we haven't, that you really, really want the listeners to take and keep close to their hearts. Could you think of something?
Yeah, I mean, I would say don't dismiss your pain, even if it feels small. Because what is small can grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and unresolved pain comes out sideways. And, it comes out sideways on the people we love the most. And so I would want your listeners to know that no matter what you've gone through, big or small, you're worthy of healing, and Jesus wants to heal your hurts so that you don't hurt the people you love. So say yes to him today.
Wow. Okay.
That's a good one thing.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
How can people find you and your ministry? Willow, how can they find your book?
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much for having me on. I love your hearts. I love what you do. I'm excited for your book to come out. It's very exciting.
We are too. We're kind of exhausted right now. Yeah.
You're going to get there, guys. You're going to get there. If people want to find me, they can hop on Instagram, Willow Ann Weston. They can come to my website, willowweston.com. If you want to get a copy of my book, Collide, Running into Healing When Life Hands You Hurt, it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the things. So, yeah.
Awesome. And we will put that in the show notes. So, I'm just going to say thank you to Willow for being so transparent, for coming on the show today. We're going to suggest that everybody check out her book, Collide. And please, if you know someone who needs to hear this conversation, please share today's episode and tag us and tag Willow on all your social media channels. Thanks so much, Willow, for joining us.
Thanks for listening to I Wish You Could Hear This. Remember to subscribe to our podcast. And as always, forward today's audio or video link to a friend, counselor, or pastor who would be encouraged.